everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. I am Georga-Kay. I am a second-year history PhD student at Brown University, and in today's video is going to be an exciting one because I'm doing a finance video, personal finance. Today's video is going to be my 10 essential money tips for navigating your PhD program, navigating graduate school. I just want to say ahead of time, I'm not a financial expert by any means, not even a little bit, but I'm just talking about my own personal experience of someone who's interested in money, someone who likes personal finance content, just the things that I've learned about how grad school specifically, how you can navigate that landscape and save and do all the things and have somewhat of a good financial balance. If you're new, I have a dog, Harley. She's pretty much in all of my videos, just hanging around in the background. So if you see her back there, that's what she's doing. But yeah, I want to share the personal finance tips that I've learned as a first year going into my second year, things that I'm currently trying to do or things that I have implemented that I feel like have been helpful in saving and sort of just navigating grad school financially. So number one, I would say instead of focusing on tiny incidental spending, like how much are you spending on coffee, how much are you spending on buying clothes or something like that, I would focus on keeping your overhead really low. And so this is actually something I talked to Emily about in my episode for PhDs for personal finance, which I will link in the description box. I talk about all about how I navigated money my first year of my PhD program, but I highly recommend listening to that episode and listening to Emily's podcast because she has so many different PhD students from different backgrounds talk about how they navigate money and personal finance. But yeah, as I said in that podcast episode, I talked about the fact that when I was coming to grad school, I focused on keeping my rent within a reasonable price range and keeping my transportation costs low by selling my car. So that's something I would consider because grad school can be expensive, and if you don't have a large savings bucket, you really want to make sure that you have a lot of wiggle room in your budget if something does come up, or to give you that ability to start saving. And so I would think about how can you keep your rent, which is usually one of the largest costs, low as you can. For me, I knew I didn't want to live with roommates, but I just chose for a smaller space. I wanted to live alone, but I knew that living alone is expensive. So I currently, you can probably tell, live in a studio apartment, which is just a little bit cheaper and gives me a couple $100s of wiggle room in my budget that I wouldn't have if I have opted for either a bigger place or somewhere a little bit closer to campus. The second personal finance tip I have for graduate students is to use some sort of personal finance tracker. I have just got into this, and I will say I was the type of person where I was relatively avoidant with money. I would sometimes check, of course I would check to make sure I had enough money to spend, but I wasn't like checking in terms of what am I spending per category or anything like that. I bounced around between trying Mint when that was a big thing. I've heard about YNAB, You Need a Budget, which is pretty popular, but I just never got into it. And so I've tried a couple different trackers, and I will say I would just recommend doing that. Just trying the tracker, seeing what works. I personally landed on Rocket Money, which is a tracker that I use to kind of like look at my spending. I check it every day now as a personal challenge to myself because I usually would only check it like once a month once I got paid, which is not good if you're actually trying to make changes in your personal finance. You want to make sure that you're getting comfortable with looking at your money every day and looking at your accounts so that you can be more accountable to saving and more accountable to investing if that's a goal that you have. And so yeah, so I use Rocket Money, which I love the interface of Rocket Money. It can show you how much you're spending per category. It shows you when all your bills are coming up, and so it's really good for managing your cash flow so that if you get paid once a month like I do for your stipend, you can think, okay, well, I gotta pay rent and then I'll have this much left and these how many bills are coming out this week, so I can buy this thing that I need to. And you can look and you can see, oh, I'm actually spending an extra $100 than I thought on groceries, or I'm actually spending an extra $40 on personal care items that I don't need. And so yeah, so I just highly recommend. It doesn't have to be Rocket Money, but there's so many different personal finance trackers and just using them. And the key is to use them regularly. So you don't want to just like download it and never check it, but check it frequently, get into that habit. I think habit forming at this stage is just something that I've been focusing on instead of like setting really lofty goals. Number 3, I will say, and this is more so a money saving tip, is to buy ebooks or rent or borrow books. I, as a PhD student in history, it hurts my heart to say, but I have not bought any of my books for school yet. I will eventually have to once I have fields, but that's why I'm waiting to make sure that the books that I'm buying are books that I'm going to refer to a lot, because right at this point I'm taking classes in things that are a little bit more general, that are not in my field of study, so I might not refer to them as frequently. And so this year I've gotten by downloading ebooks, borrowing a lot of my books, and just renting if you have that option as well. I know it's not the same physical books. I love physical books, so I feel the pain of like, I don't have a physical book most of the time unless I can get it from the library. But I actually find that it helps for note taking as well. Like, I take my notes digitally most of the times, and I know not everyone does that, but because I take my notes digitally and I have ebooks formats of the books, I can basically copy and paste and do all the things that I need to do. So I highly recommend, as a money saving tip, if you can, to just use your library. Libraries are awesome. Number 4 is to figure out taxes as soon as possible. Like, I will say taxes as a graduate student is incredibly complicated at times, and you never know, especially if you're going from fellowship to TA, that changes your taxes. It also depends on how much money you're actually making, where that money is coming from, and there's hardly again. But yeah, you want to make sure. The best way to figure out taxes is to actually, usually your graduate school orientation, they'll tell you like, okay, well, we have like a tax software for students, or if they have any consultants that can talk to people about their taxes, if they recommend accountants. I highly recommend, I know everyone has their different opinions, but I just used an accountant. I know a lot of people will find that softwares really work, but if you're overly anxious like me about taxes and doing things wrong, I use a tax accountant, and they're a lot cheaper than you would think, usually less than $100. And I find that if you use an accountant, you might actually save more money than you would think, because they know like the right deductions, things that you can do, so that you can save money on your taxes if you're eligible for those things. So I would just recommend, I mean, I think it sounds really pricey, but it's not. Like, you can get a tax accountant, and of course, if you're comfortable, you've been doing your taxes for a while, you can use a tax software. But I would just try to get ahead on that. Just try to think about, okay, well, what software does your school recommend? Do they pay for a software for people? Can you just do it on one of the regular ones for free? Or you can find a really good accountant in your area that usually, if you are in a university space, they have accountants around in that local area that you can use. Number 5, quickly, because this one is a little bit more obvious, is to find free and cost-effective hobbies. You can still make an active effort to do things, but not spend so much money. And I will say, if you're in a university, take advantage of the free things that they offer, free events, free workshops. Usually those things will have free food, they'll have people to mingle with, and that will be a good way to sort of like get all your boxes checked for your social time, but also not spend the time. Number 6, I would say, is a good financial habit for grad students, is keeping a list of funding sources at your school. I have a Notion board where I write funding for travel, for conferences, travel for summer funding, opportunities, because you get emails and you're like, okay, I'll keep note of that, but you never really do. And so I would just say, like, if you hear, okay, this is a place that you get money for summer funding, this is a place where you get money for conference travel, all of those things, I would just go ahead and write those down on a list so that you're always aware, okay, I got a conference, this is how I can get money to go there, or I have a little bit of research to do, I need some extra funding, this is where to get it. It's just a good financial habit, because as graduate students, usually there's funding sources everywhere. There's funding sources in your graduate school, funding sources in your department, funding sources from external organizations. It's a lot, and you can be missing out on a lot of money if you are not actually keeping track of it. Number 7 is kind of works with number 6 in a sense, but it's like keeping track of resources at your school. So a lot of times you have resources that you might not even know. Your school might be paying for something that you don't know. It might be a software, it might be counseling, all of these things that are usually discounted or completely free to students. I would keep a list of things that you know that you might want to use in the future. Like for me, when I came to Brown, I knew that I might want to use their counselors to potentially find someone that I could speak to in the area. So I kept track of that. There's also things that I kept track of, like there's also things where it's like they have emergency services for students who might be going through financial trouble, so writing that down in case you ever need it, or things like that. So I would just say keep track of all of the little pockets of resources that they have at your school that you might need in the future. Number 8 is to sign up for email lists. Email lists are how you'll find out about what's happening in the school. If you're like me, like it can be overwhelming where you're like, like, I don't really know what's happening. How do people know what's happening constantly? Of course, you might get an email from your department that's telling you what's happening, but if you're interdisciplinary or if you just want to be a part of different orgs, I recommend, even if you're like not sure, just signing up for their email list. You can always unsubscribe, but if you sign up for their email list, then you can see what events are happening, if there's like free food, if there are free giveaways, or even if they're just someone really cool that you're gonna see at your school that you're like, I'm interested in seeing this person and they're bringing them for free. That's always a good thing. And so I signed up for so many lists that I'm still a part of, and sometimes I'll be like, oh, I see that this person's coming, they're doing a book talk, how fun, I can go on a lunch break or something and go do that. And that's like a fun way to spend an afternoon or something. Also, a little side tip to this that's not financial at all is I would recommend streamlining your email. I should probably do a video on this, but you can set up your email where certain things go into different folders like as soon as they hit. So if you're overwhelmed by like email lists and things like that, but you still want to be involved, you can just send it to like a specific folder. I send it to like an events folder where basically all my email lists, things that I signed up for, go there, and I check it whenever I feel like I'm in the mood to do something or just trying to see what's happening on campus. Number 9 is kind of a big one, and it's setting up a payday routine. So having a good payday routine is essential to managing your money, especially as a PhD student where you might be working with a little less money, or you just like have, like me, I just get paid once a month. So I have to make sure that once the money hits my account, what's happening to it. And the best way to do this is automating everything. So automating a percentage of your savings to go into a different saving account, or automating investing, like sending a little chunk of money to investing, and then even thinking about, okay, well, what bills need to be paid first. For me, I have to manually pay my rent, so I always go ahead once I get paid because it sort of overlaps, go ahead and pay my rent on that day. And so just making sure you're checking your cash flow. And so when your money hits your account, that's a good time to just sit down and be like, okay, what job does this money have to do? How much can I feasibly save? If you're investing, how much can you feasibly invest for this month? And then thinking about what bills need to be paid manually, and everything else can be automated. And so highly recommend. I will do a more in-depth video about my payday routine once I feel like I have somewhat of a payday routine set. Right now I'm just like figuring out what I like to do when I get paid and figuring out all my systems. But once I feel like I have a good system in place, I will make an in-depth video about what I do on my paydays because I'm still figuring it out. And the last one is something that you're kind of doing by watching this video, and is seeking out financial information. I think it's so important for us graduate students to be financially literate. Some people, they get that from their families, they get that from the people that they're around, but for a lot of us, we have to seek out this information for ourselves. And so if you're one of those people where you feel like you don't know what to do with money, you're like, I'm in graduate school, I either don't make enough or I'm trying to survive on what I do have, I would just seek out more financial influences. Some of the resources that I love is the financial diet, people talking about everyday spending, all of the things, and how that intersects with your different identities. Again, I love personal finance for PhDs. I think that's an amazing resource for PhD students specifically, because there's just some things that are unique to us as students where it's like, we don't get paid in the same way, we don't get the same benefits. And so it's always good to make sure that you're listening to people who are in a very similar circumstance to you. And even someone like me, I'm not a financial expert, I'm just someone who's navigating, learning about money myself as a PhD student, and I will continue to share that as I learn more and more. And so I would say definitely just keep learning, keep looking for resources online, and eventually we'll all figure it out. So yeah, so that was my video. 10 essential tips for managing your personal finances as a PhD student that I learned during my first year. I hope this video was somewhat helpful to some of you. I know that a lot of us are just navigating how to do this thing, especially as PhD students, which is such a unique circumstance. I hope that it was helpful, and I look forward to making more personal finance video, more personal finance content. If you have any questions or suggestions for future videos, you can drop those in the comments, and I'll have all my favorite resources for personal finances linked in the description. I'll see you guys in my next video.